morning. Welcome to Connect Church. My name is Nate Rovenstine, and normally I say that every week, but you might need a refresher just to remember since I've been gone for 3 weeks. And if you didn't know I was gone for 3 weeks, welcome back as well. So we're glad that you're back. We had a great time. My wife and I celebrated 35 years of marriage with a trip. We spent some time in Germany and Switzerland and Austria, and a night in the Detroit airport. So, which was not the highlight of our trip, but and certainly unplanned. But we're really grateful to be back. You know, one of the cool things about pastoring this church is that I know that when I'm gone, you're in good hands and you're continuing our vision. Our vision is not about Nate. It's about worshiping Christ, growing disciples, and serving our world. And you guys had Vacation Bible School while I was gone. That was a great week. I got reports back on that. We had kids go down to NTS, Never the Same Camp in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. I actually went down and spent a day or so with them, and God really worked in wonderful ways down there. You'll hear a little bit more about that at the end of the service. You know, Pastor Ben and Jamie did a great job in proclaiming the word. I always listen when I'm gone to those sermons online, as you can do on podcasts. And so it's really great to know that you're in good hands while we're gone. So we went on this little trip, and you know, if you go to Germany, it's not southern Germany, it's Bavaria, right? If you've ever been over there, you know that there's this area that used to be sort of a country or an area called Bavaria, and it's really southern Germany, and we spent some time there. And while we were there, we kind of followed the trail or visited some homes of a man by the name of King Ludwig II. Some of you may know of him, and he was a part of the Wittelsbach dynasty, and he lived, to put in a little bit of historical context. Yeah, he's an interesting looking dude, isn't he? I see some of the expressions on your face. He's a little crazy, actually. But he lived in the time period of, he was born in 1845, and he died in 1886. So to kind of think about where that is in history, he would have been alive while the United States was going through the Civil War and a little bit after that. And so it was a while back, but it wasn't like, you know, the Middle Ages or anything much earlier than that. So this man, King Ludwig II, was born in the Nymphenburg Palace, which is located outside of Munich. This was the summer home of the family. It was there before he was born. It's a beautiful castle. We toured it. There's all kinds of amazing furniture and artwork and chandeliers and all those kinds of things. His family lived in the residence in Munich, so he spent some of his time here in the residence in Munich. You'll see, again, a nice place, lots of rooms, lots of fancy things, about everything you could want in those days. But his father, Ludwig II, rebuilt an ancient castle out in the Bavarian countryside down near Fussen, Germany, what is now Fussen, Germany. And I hope I pronounced this right. I worked really hard at this, but he rebuilt the castle called Hohenschwangau. And this is his castle that he would visit as a boy, that his father rebuilt. And so he would go visit this in the summers, and actually ended up spending a lot of time there. It's in the mountains, and if you look out those windows, you can see a beautiful lake down there with swans on it. That's why the Schwangau is in the name of it. And so this is where Ludwig spent a lot of his time. And as he lived in this castle, he dreamed of when he was old enough to build his own castles. And so as he became a man and became the power, you know, the power was passed on to him, he built what's known as the Linderhof Castle, which is, we didn't visit, but here's a picture of it, and it is a little ways up in the mountains again. It's built and modeled after, like a mini Versailles. If you've ever seen Versailles, it's modeled after that. So here's this Ludwig II building this castle, but it still wasn't enough for him. Now, just remember what he's experienced in his life. He lives in the residence in Munich, the most elaborate building in that city. He spent his summers in the Nymphenburg Palace or down in the mountains of Bavaria in this castle that he grew up in and the castle that he built. But it still wasn't enough. He dreamed of a new castle. And so he built what is literally Neuschwanstein, which is a new castle. And it had the convenience of the 1800s. So some running water, some of those kinds of things. But it was modeled after a castle in the Middle Ages. Does this look familiar to anybody, this castle? Yeah, it looks like Disneyland, right? And Disney World. And that Walt Disney took a tour of Bavaria. We should have seen little plaques. Walt was here. We didn't see any of those. But he took a tour, and he saw the Matterhorn. So if you remember, the original Disneyland had a Matterhorn. Saw that. And he saw this castle, and he modeled the castles in both Disneyland and Disney World after Neuschwanstein. So we toured Neuschwanstein. It was fabulous and amazing. But here's what you need to know about Neuschwanstein. As Ludwig grew older, two things happened. Well, one thing really happened. The powers shifted Culture changed. Remember Civil War, 1870, or 1840s, 1860s? And so democracy was coming in vogue. Republics were coming in vogue. Monarchies and dynasties were kind of going out. So as he was building this castle, he was losing his power. But here's this man, Ludwig II, a little bit crazy, thinking and dreaming about this castle. And I'm thinking to myself, what will it take for you to be happy, dude? The residents didn't do it. Nymphenburg didn't do it. Hohenschwangau didn't do it. Lindorf didn't do it. He built this castle in order to find something deep inside of him that he was looking for. He lived in the castle, moved in before it was finished. In his lifetime, it never was finished because he lived in the castle for 172 days. And then he died in a boat. Accident, suicide, murder, nobody knows. Think about that. When I think about Ludwig II, and I could have picked any number of contemporaries to us or historical figures for this illustration, the phrase chasing after the wind comes to mind. Okay, is that a great mental image or what? Chasing after the wind. Where's the wind? How do you know when you catch the wind? If you chase after the wind, how do you know when you've caught it? And Ludwig was chasing after the wind. This is the human condition, and it's a common phrase in the book of Ecclesiastes in the scriptures. We're going to look over the next several weeks in this series called Chasing the Wind at the book of Ecclesiastes. I want you to listen to the first chapter, verses 12 through 14. Now, Ecclesiastes was written by or about King Solomon. You that are biblical scholars can hash that out amongst yourselves. It's not that important to me to understand that. What I get is he's writing about this idea of chasing after the wind. Listen to what Koheleth, or the teacher, writes. I, the teacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem. I applied my mind to study and to explore by wisdom all that is done under the heavens. What a heavy burden God has laid on mankind. I have seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Ecclesiastes challenges the assumption of easy answers. It challenges the assumption that if you just do the right thing, you'll get the right results and everything will work out for you. Ecclesiastes, the central claim of the book is that everything is meaningless because it is impossible for us to understand what God is really up to. It's a little depressing to read the book of Ecclesiastes. Not as depressing as reading Lamentations. If you're in a bad way or feeling sad and it's been cloudy for a while, don't read the book of Lamentations. Read that on a nice sunny day when you're feeling well. But not too far behind it is the book of Ecclesiastes. Because in the book you see this chasing after the wind, this meaningless. In fact, listen how it starts. This is the lead for the book, right? Like you always want to start on a high point. Here's how it starts. The words of the teacher, son of David, king of Jerusalem. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Not just meaningless, but utterly meaningless. In fact, everything is meaningless. Like he's really drilling the point home. What do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun? And if you've read the book of Ecclesiastes, you know he starts out that way, and then he spends not all of the book, but a bulk of the book just making a list, kind of going through some of the things that might bring pleasure, that might bring meaning to our lives, and he begins to sort of check them off as meaningless. He talks about money. Probably not a lot of disagreement with us. It's funny. Money's a funny thing. We all know it won't bring happiness, but we keep trying to pursue it, right? But I think we know that's not that great of a revelation that money ultimately won't bring happiness. And he talks about pleasure. I think the same thing. I think we all know that you can only go to Worlds of Fun so many times, right? You can only do something that you really enjoy so many times before it sort of reaches a dead end. And it's like in athletics or whatever, you win the championship and you're like, yay! And now my life goes on, and then you got to win it next year. And we understand that sort of advancement has its weakness, and there's a meaninglessness to advancement. We keep moving our way up the corporate ladder, or we keep getting advancement, and we find that there's still this hole in our heart, this lack in our heart. Kind of like Ludwig, we keep getting more and more and more power, and yet, still not really working out for us. And he even talks about work. I have a high work ethic. I believe I believe our culture needs people. Like, I love dirty jobs. Like, I love that guy. I love what he's doing. Like, I love, but, you know, at the end of the day, some of you that are, you know, if I'm anything, I'm a workaholic, and you know that at some point you're like, I've worked and worked and worked, and I still got to go work and work and work, and there's kind of a meaningless to that. But here's the one that really threw me. You ever read the book of Ecclesiastes, and he comes to the idea of wisdom? I'm like, what? Wisdom? There would be value and meaning in wisdom, right? Wouldn't it be, if I know some things in life, wouldn't that be valuable to somebody else? Wouldn't that bring satisfaction to me? So in Bavaria and Switzerland and Austria and Europe in general, when we travel there, we enjoy riding the trains. They're on time. They're usually clean. It's an efficient way to get around. So we were on a train. Most of the trains we rode, they were not completely full. This particular one, I think we were coming out of Munich. I don't remember exactly where we were going, but this train was packed full. I mean, not like a subway. You know, most of the trains over there aren't like subways. People were standing in the aisles without places to hold. It was packed full. And it's getting a little tense in there as everybody's kind of, you know, squashed in together. And we were sitting in the train, and we were fortunate to have a seat because there was a lot of people standing, and there was a young group of college students kind of behind us. They were standing in the aisles. And the best Janet and I could surmise is they did not understand that we could understand English. Okay? Which is really not very smart if you're traveling in Europe. There's a lot of people over there that understand English. So they were talking, and most of their conversations was just boring college stuff, you know, talking about somewhat inappropriate at times, but nothing too bad. It's just like, whatever. And then they started saying, as they got near the end of the train ride, they started saying, when we get off, just push your way through, no matter what. Push your way through the crowds. I'm like, I didn't say anything to my wife, but if you know my wife, we didn't have to say anything. We kind of looked at each other. So the train ride ends. It's coming to an end. Everybody starts getting their stuff. Janet and I got our stuff, and we got out in the aisle. We're going to help these people be good Americans, right? And they started pushing. Like, I'm not kidding. They started pushing. Like, we're old people, and they start pushing us out of the way. And, like, Janet just, like, went like that and just, like, held her ground. I'm like, way to go, honey. I'm so proud of you in this moment. And I, like, stood there. And so then they're like, come on, let us try. I said, no, you're not. I was like, no, you're not going to do that. There's people. We'll all get off the train. It's going to be okay. Like, I was trying to right this social injustice right here, you know. We got into a little, I'm sorry if this is disappointing you, but we got into a little, but justice demands, you know, fortitude, right? And so I finally started this staring, you know, like, I'm not going to say anything else to you, but I stared at her like this. Didn't work. Finally, she said this to me. And I went and texted in my phone and my lists because I wanted to make sure I got this right. She said, I don't have to listen to you. You're an old man. I've got my whole life ahead of me. I don't even know what that means for sure. It's like, what? Don't you want my wisdom? Don't you know that people understand what you're doing? Don't you know you're making Americans look bad here with your rudeness? Don't you know that you shouldn't be doing, didn't your dad and mom ever teach you that you shouldn't treat people? Like, I had all this wisdom to share with her, but it was meaningless. Right? She didn't want what I had. I'm being a little bit silly, but the reality is, right, that even wisdom is meaningless. What do we do with this? How depressing is this so far? There's a phrase in the book of Ecclesiastes that I think is really the key to understanding the whole book. It's used 29 times in the book. So if you have a short book like that and the word's used 29 times or a phrase, you need to pay attention to it. Here it is. It's the phrase, under the sun. Did you catch it at the end of the last passage? What do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun? Do you catch what he means? What the teacher is teaching us is that the things that we see with our physical eyes, the things that we experience under the sun, in other words, in the physical realm, there's an inability of those things to bring satisfaction to us. And if we were to sort of parse this out, and as we go through, we're going to see these two principles I'm going to put on the screen. These two principles that play themselves out in the book of Ecclesiastes. First of all, the writer says that he is telling us that not everything under the sun is of equal value, but not anything under the sun is of ultimate value. The writer is telling us, as you read through the book, I encourage you to do it with me this summer, you'll see that he sort of elevates some things above other things. In other words, there are things, not everything under the sun is the same. Seeking wisdom is better than seeking pleasure. Right? Seeking generosity is better than seeking greed. So he's given us this principle. He's not saying everything under the sun is the same, but he is saying nothing under the sun can bring ultimate value to us. Nothing under the sun is of ultimate value. Here's another way of maybe saying the same thing with a different lens. There are things under the sun that can give us incredible pleasure. But there's nothing under the sun that can give us ultimate meaning. You see, when we read the book of Ecclesiastes, we are tempted to say that everything on this planet is just miserable, and all we have to do is just try to survive. No, he would not say that at all. There are good things in this life that we should enjoy. We should enjoy art and beauty, and we should enjoy the pursuit of excellence, and we should enjoy advancement as long as we're not stepping on anyone. We should enjoy even the finances that God gives us and how we can use those for the advancement of his kingdom and blessing others. Those are all things that bring value to us. But none of them bring ultimate meaning to us. God has given us so many gifts that bring pleasure to our lives. Every time I pull up my phone, picture little Nora Lynn, my granddaughter. When I'm having I'm totally serious about this. I'm not exaggerating one bit. When I'm having a bad moment or a bad day, I'll just pull up my phone, and she just makes me smile. There's pleasure in that relationship that I have with my grandchildren and with my daughters, and even with my son-in-laws. Most of the time. There's pleasure in working hard, and there's pleasure in advancement. There's pleasure in seeing that God is blessing our efforts. All those things have value, but none of them have ultimate value. See, Nora Lynn can never fully satisfy the longing in my heart that only God can. She can't do it. Number one, it's not fair to her. Number two, don't make your children or your grandchildren gods. Don't put them on a pedestal and ask them to give you something that they are incapable of giving you. There's things in life that have great value, but nothing has ultimate value. So what do we do with this book? At the end of the book, the teacher writes, "Now all has been heard. Here's the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil." There it is. Do you want ultimate meaning, ultimate value? Fear God and keep his commandments. That's not under the sun. God is not under the sun. That's the point. God is not under the sun. Fear God and keep his commandments, and you'll find ultimate joy and meaning. But have you ever read the Old Testament? Who was able to do that? Moses, a little bit. David, some. Oh yeah, David, the one that murdered and committed adultery. Yeah. I mean, the whole story of the Old Testament is this call to fear God and keep his commandments and this failure of humanity to do so. The whole Old Testament is longing for a way to do that. The whole Old Testament is this longing in the heart of humanity to reach out and know who God is and to serve and worship him. You see, Ecclesiastes is longing for an answer. The whole Old Testament is looking for an answer for fulfillment. You know where this is going, right? The answer is Jesus. That Jesus is the one who brings that which is above the sun under the sun. He brings God to us. God does not stop being transcendent, but he then becomes immanent or intimate with us. No other religion says what we say, that God is at once in us and supreme above all. God is come under the sun through Jesus to redeem our lives. So here's the takeaway for the morning, the thing that if you forget everything else I say, remember this: Jesus gives value to everything under the sun. Catch it. He gives value to everything under the sun. Pleasure, money, hard work, advancement, wisdom. all the things listed and all the things not. He brings, so all these things that Solomon says are meaningless, Jesus makes them meaningful. He transforms them. Not in a moment, but over our lifetimes, as we surrender and learn how he wants to use these beautiful gifts in our life or these challenges in our life. He transforms them. Without Jesus, even wisdom is meaningless. Think about that. Without Jesus, even wisdom is meaningless. But with Jesus, even suffering has value. He does not only transform those good things, but he transforms those ugly things. This is our story. This is why we gather. This is why we get in growth groups and remind each other of this story over and over again, that Jesus can transform us. He gives value and meaning to everything under the sun. Without Jesus, Ecclesiastes is spot on, but with Jesus, Ecclesiastes is fulfilled. This became really clear to me and I just thought of this morning, actually, and I kind of added it to my sermon. We also visited Dachau while we were in Germany, one of the concentration camps. You know, when Janet and I would go visit places, and we would leave, and we would talk about what we saw and just reflect. And when we left Dachau, we just kind of sat on the train. It's just sobering to go to a concentration camp and see. And let me tell you something, the version of the concentration camp we saw was extremely sanitized, right? I mean, it's been years since it's happened. It's now a tourist spot. But what happened there is still haunting. It haunts my soul to stand. And you've seen pictures of when the Allied troops would come in and rescue the concentration camps. You saw pictures, and I recognized some of those pictures, and I realized I was standing in those spots where bodies had been stacked. It did something to my soul. And the horror that happened there. Then I thought this morning about Corrie ten Boom. I know that's a reference that many of you may not get if you're younger than me, but Google her. She's a woman who was put in a concentration camp, not in Dachau, but in Ravensbrück. And she experienced that horrific time in a concentration camp. She survived. Her sister died. It's just horrific. But out of that came incredible beauty. Now I want you to compare Ludwig II to Corrie ten Boom and tell me that Jesus doesn't make a difference. Jesus can transform everything. Without Jesus, life is meaningless. 1 Peter 2:9 says this. This is who we are, friends, as believers in Jesus. You're a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession. That you may live on your own and do your own thing. No. That you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness and into his wonderful light. Once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Because of the mercy of Jesus, life makes sense under the sun, and even tragedy can be redeemed. But also pleasure can be redeemed. And money can be redeemed. And advancement can be redeemed. And work can be redeemed. And everything that the writer of the book of Ecclesiastes said is meaningless, Jesus gives meaning to it. One more story. In Munich, we had a little tour, a little audio tour that we were supposed to go on. We're kind of Rick Steves fans when we travel to Europe, and we had a Rick Steves tour in our little earbuds, walking around like quintessential tourists. And we started listening to this tour. So we followed these before. You look at this thing, he explains it. He says, turn left, go 100 yards, and turn right, go 100 yards. And so we started this little city walk tour. We're in the church that he said to start in. And I was listening to what he was saying and kind of looking around, and it's like, I don't quite see. There was supposed to be a skeleton. I was really anxious to see that, and I didn't see it. But maybe they took it out for cleaning. That's literally what I thought. And then he said something about apostles, and I said, oh, there's some apostles over there. Well, there's apostles in every church. Anyway, finally we convinced ourselves we were in the right church, and we sort of looked around, and they said, come out of the building, turn left, and go 100 yards. We came out of the building, turned left, and then you'll see this, and we didn't see that. And we thought, okay, we must have gone wrong. We went back. We went out the other door. We turned 100. No, we did. We kept going, kept listening and kept going and trying to make ourselves think that what he was saying was what we were seeing. And occasionally it would line up, just enough to keep you going down that trail. And finally, we asked people where this thing was, and we got clear over there, and we were all over the place. We saw a tribute to Michael Jackson, which we were not expecting to see. I don't know how that fit in with, all the other stuff. Bottom line is, we started in the wrong place. And when you start in the wrong place, you can make all the efforts to go everywhere you're supposed to go and do everything you're supposed to do. And occasionally life begins to make sense, right? There's these little moments where you're like, oh yeah, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. And then there's this lostness that you feel. Ecclesiastes is this call, give me a place to start. The New Testament's answer is, you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood. You've been called out of darkness and into his wonderful light through Jesus. Start with Jesus. In first service, we baptized some folks, and we celebrated the fact that they started with Jesus. And I just want to encourage us as we go through this series and we begin to look at these things in the Old Testament that are meaningless. Let's remember the answer is Jesus. Pray with me. Lord, help us to start with you, but not just to start with you, but to keep walking with you. Help us to trust you. Well, Lord, we know that, I know, that even when we get this right, like theologically, when we understand this, that still life is a challenge and life is a journey. But without you, life is meaningless. There's a big difference between life being a challenge and life being meaningless. Thank you, Lord, for redeeming everything. The broken things and the good things. Thank you that we do not have to live life under the sun, but we can live life with the Son who resides in us. In Jesus' name, amen.